Hello again. Welcome to the continuation of the South University's Christmas lectures. This is the second talk we have on today with Dr. Andrew Wedgbury, talking about one game to rule them all, how game studies may unlock the secrets to humanity, that's quite a deep question. And rather than me trying to sit here and think out the window and try and have that deep thought process, I'm going to invite Andrew up and we'll have a little bit of a chat before I fully pass over to him so he can explain to you, yeah, is there really one rule to them all? Hi, Andrew.
Hi there.
So it's is it gonna are we going to unlock the secrets of humanity? That's deep. That is
Wow.
that is really
Yeah.
deep. Mm.
One of the tough things about trying to say what's the meaning of life is that it's one of those questions that nobody actually knows the answer to. So we can keep on asking ourselves the same question over and over again in different ways, which I think I'll get across in the lecture today.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, are we going to unlock the meaning of life? I strongly doubt it. But we'll give it a go.
Absolutely. Well, rather than me sitting here and rambling, I'll let the professional here take over and talk to us about the one game to rule them all, how game studies may unlock the secrets of humanity. So, without further ado, Andrew, please take us away.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. And so yeah, so we've got quite a change of pace, I suppose, compared to what we've been doing for the most of this week. All of the lectures have been really interesting and been really engaging, and I'm going to kind of take us in a completely different way and start thinking about whether games can be used to answer some of the deeper questions in the world. And by that, I mean I'm going to actually speak probably about the biggest question in the world, and that is, is there a meaning to life? Is there something that we can actually put our finger on that tells us that yes, this is what we're all here for, and this is what our existence means to the universe? Uh, and as I just said, I very much doubt I'll be able to do that. It's one of those questions that nobody knows the answer to, so we can't answer the question and then say, "Are we right?" But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best shot and see how we go today, and see what you think at the end of it. So it may be a little bit big-headed to think about questions like the meaning of life. What does it mean? What can we actually say about the meaning of life? Why are we here? And what are we doing? And it's been a question that's been really kind of central to my own personal thinking throughout my own academic career. It's been something that has always popped up to me, and it's always been the thing I'm trying to answer, no matter what I'm doing. I started my academic career looking at angling, for example, the sport of fishing, and how people interacted online to engage in their hobbies. And to me at that time, fishing gave some sort of meaning to life, and it was some sort of outlet that we could all enjoy. So the way I'm going to approach this question is going to be for quite a sort of self-centered personal journey that I'm hoping that you'll indulge me on, whilst I tell you kind of my story and how I've got to my current thinking. It's going to involve some pretty big names from the world of sociology, one probably underrepresented name from the world of philosophy, and a few other celebs as we go by. So about me, okay? So I'm a sociologist. I'm actually a sports sociologist, as I mentioned before. My PhD was in the field of angling and how people interact with their hobbies online. I'm also a retro gaming fan. I would class myself as a dreamer. I think my whole family would say Andrew's a dreamer. And I'm also a cat owner, and that is genuinely relevant. I promise it's going to be a key point of what's kind of made me get to where I am in thinking about, the meaning of things as we stand. So the picture in the top right hand corner is me in the late 70s. Also relevant, I promise you. I was not just trying to show off that I was a cute, chubby kid, and now I'm a cute, chubby adult. But it's actually genuinely relevant because I think my quest to find the answers that I'm looking for kind of started back then, and I didn't realize that games were going to give me those answers or even start pointing me in those answers until quite recently. So yeah, as a child, that little ginger fella was into literally everything, and it's been a habit of mine since forever. A constant distraction and annoyance to my family and friends that I change what I'm interested in on a daily basis. From fishing, which has been a lifelong passion to me, to computer games, another lifelong passion, to board games, backgammon, uh, anything to do with leisure. And I suppose I kind of class myself as a leisure sociologist, and much of the work that I do kind of focuses on the world of leisure and how we engage with leisure and enjoying ourselves. So really, I suppose I'd call myself a man of leisure overall. It's been that way since forever. And there's another picture not long after this one was taken of me with my arm in a sling. And I still hold many of the scars from my little adventures when I was young. So it's just to point out really that this is not a new thing for me. It's something I've been thinking about since I was that big, knee-high to a grasshopper, and that's kind of a hint because we're going to get a lot of grasshoppers in this particular conversation, and that will hopefully become more clear as we go along. So, at school, because of my fascination in everything that existed in the world, I really didn't do too great. I left school without a GCSE to my name. I had no education to speak of, and I went out to work for most of my early life, right up until my 30s, actually. And then, in a kind of jump that's still a mystery to me personally to this day, I woke up one morning and said, "Okay, I think I want to be a doctor. I want to be a PhD." It was no reason behind it. There was nothing before, nothing after. I kind of had a loose feeling that I wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to be Indiana Jones, maybe, but I was in my 30s, so we can't really have those fantasies. Although since then, since speaking to many archaeologists, I find out that that's actually not a strange fantasy and not a strange motivation to become an archaeologist. But somehow the archaeology thing didn't work out for me. I'm still very involved in the field of archaeology and still do a lot of my research with the Centre of Archaeology here at Staffordshire University. But it was just a kind of leg up for me and a kind of step in a direction that I wanted to go. Now, a really big influence on my entire life has been my father. My father was a very important person in my life. And my father and I kind of played this little game. After I'd decided I was going to be a doctor, I was going to go to university, I was going to start from scratch and be something great. We got into this kind of two-way game where essentially I would go to my dad and I would say, "Guess what I'm going to do?" And he would give me the usual answers. He was really, "Get a real job. You're not smart enough. You can't do that. You're wasting your time. You're wasting everybody's time." Uh, and to me at the time, this was a real challenge. I used to go up to my dad every week virtually, say, "I've got a new idea, Dad. I'm doing this," and it used to be, "No, get a job, do something special. Don't do that. You haven't got the brains to do that." And it kind of, I felt at the time like it was putting me down, like it was degrading me, and that was a real challenge, and it was something that I had to fight with for quite a long time. But what it actually did was make me more keen to do what I wanted to do, to get what I wanted to get, and to be what I'd hoped to be. And I just assumed that this was just my motivation. I didn't think this was anything that my dad had motivation. But of course, the day came, unfortunately, that I went to my dad to tell him that I wanted to do something, and there was silence because uh, sadly, not so long before this, we'd had one of our normal altercations about me wanting a career in fishing, and Dad had said that it was a waste of time and I shouldn't be doing that, and I should get a proper job. And we had an argument, and I left uh, on bad terms, and we never met again. Sadly, he passed away a few days later before we'd actually got over our little spat. And it's one of those things that happens to many people, and it's not a thing that I particularly linger on too much, apart from when I'm trying to think of what the life is all about. And it's this loss, I think, that quite often starts people with the question, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Why are we now? Why are people now gone from our lives that are so important to us that we didn't even have a chance to realize they was important at the time? And I think that is kind of the thing that first triggered me on this kind of quest to see if what I'm interested in the world of games actually had something to say about this. So, first of all, let's just say that this is a question that we cannot answer. There's no answer to what is the meaning of life. There's no a definite yes, that is definitely what the meaning of life is. Nobody will be able to tell us for sure. Nobody's coming back to say, actually, you know what? I've been on the other side, and this is now what the meaning of life is, and I can tell you that this is a fact. Okay, so the questions that I'm going to ask in this lecture are kind of pointless in a way, as so many philosophical questions are pointless. There's no way I'm ever going to be sure, and I think by telling you this story, you're going to see the way that my brain has kind of bounced around, and not really accepted exactly that I can't know this answer. But this is one of the major things that all researchers have. We're trying to find an answer to questions that can't be answered. And that's a big challenge in life. That's a big reason that we do what we do. So, anybody who is involved in any level of game studies will know Joseph Hertzinger. Sorry, Johann Hertzinger. Oh, got a name wrong. That's terrible etiquette. Sorry, Johann. And he wrote a famous book called Homo Ludens. Homo Ludens basically translates the man, the player. Okay, Johann Hertzinger thought that man was defined by the fact that they play games, that they enjoy life. Okay, rather than man the thinker, Homo sapien, we are actually players. It doesn't matter what you take away from us as human beings. You cannot take away the fact that we play. And he argued this because animals play. Okay, so there's no need for animals to have a civilization in order to enjoy play. They play naturally. Wild animals can be seen to play. Domestic animals can be seen to play, and life at all levels seems to make play an important part of its existence. And in this famous poster that we all know, it's called The Ascent of Man. Uh, and I think, sorry, I think that this is one of the big misnomers in the history, and it makes a fact that we are seeing ourselves as the center of the universe. It's this human habit to see that intelligence is the one thing that makes us who we are. And therefore, the ascent of man is really the descent of man. We're seeing that we're evolving into modern humans, and really, although we're seeing a progress from monkey to modern man, what we're really trying to point out in this image is that we're progressing from non-intelligent to intelligent man. And intelligence to us, of course, is the be all and end all. It's the thing that defines us as humans, and we must be the center of the universe because we are humans, and therefore intelligence is the thing that makes a species, a person, greater than anything else on the planet, and therefore gives us the right to dominate our planet. But looking at Hertzinger's work allows you, sorry, looking at Hertzinger's work allows us to put this into question. And again, there's my cat, and my cat kind of gave me this first idea. Maybe not Pepper actually, because she's quite young, but one of my cats definitely first gave me this idea. And it started me wondering, are humans and this our intelligence really the center of the universe? Okay. So if we look at it from a certain point of view, wild animals have very little time to spend playing. Okay. They are trying to find food, they're trying to survive. Their time for play is very limited. And we take a step up from wild animals to farm animals who have found a kind of compromise with us where they get more time to play, they get more protected, but ultimately they have to make the ultimate sacrifice and feed humans. So they have more time to play, but the sacrifice, the payoff that they give is far more extreme. And then we have humans, and this model kind of puts us not at the upper end of the enchilada. So human beings, we get to eat those farm animals and sometimes those wild animals, and we get to control what they do and where they are and what they get to say, well, what they get to do and how they get to act. Um, but does that make us the supreme being in this particular question? Does that make us important to the universe? And I would argue not, because about 2,000 years ago, dogs realized that if they came over and made friends with us, they'd get a free meal and that we'd look after them. They'd do some work for us, and there'd be a trade-off, and that they'd get a chance to be, uh, in a way, protected by us through the fact that they can participate in our lives. And this worked for us. We did really good, and dogs to this day work for us, and some of them are pets. But on the whole, dogs' relationship to humans has been a working one. Now, that gives them a lot of time for play because we enjoy spending time with our dogs. But cats, think about cats and how they might well be the supreme creatures on the planet. Sounds like a strange thing to say. Cats decided one day, those humans over there, they're bringing food to us in the form of mice. We'll go and kill the mice. They didn't come there to help us, they came there to get food. At some point, human beings decided, oh, those cats are cute. We'll keep those cats and we'll feed them. We'll go out and work and we'll go out and feed them. Therefore, cats are using us in effect as their slaves. They're finding food from us. They enjoy play. All they have to do in effect is be cute, and that's kind of become their main sole purpose in existence. Okay, so the cat's opportunity to play has become so advanced that now the cats don't need to develop beyond kitten level. They remain kittens their entire life. They suffer from nothing, and us humans go out and work hard and feed them and make sure they've got all the comforts and food they need. It kind of asks who is actually the dominant one there, who is the servant and who is the slave. And I would argue that we could see that as being the cat. And if we see that as being the cat, we can say that the meaning of life depends on the amount of time you have left to play. So does that mean that play is the meaning of life? And it brought me to this conclusion that games are the meaning of life. Being able to play, being able to get involved in games, it gives us meaning to our lives, and that's the important thing. But then there's this word that really is the thing why I'm an insomniac and the reason why I do research. And this word is probably. Probably will always keep us awake, especially when we're trying to answer those questions that can't be asked. Probably is probably the worst word in my life. It keeps me awake at night. I have to think. I'll come to a decision about what I think is true, and then just as I go to sleep, that word probably will come into my head. And I think it's kind of the thing that drives us as researchers is that there's always a question. Okay. So what I had to do is that my crazy theory about cats having lots of leisure time and therefore the reason to live is to have leisure time was probably not necessarily right, or at least it needed some support. And for a while, it took me to find that a while to find that support until I discovered the work of a really quite underrated philosopher, Bernard Suits. And Bernard Suits tells us that games are a voluntary attempt to overcome an unnecessary obstacle. It's probably the best description of what a game is. We voluntarily take part in a game, and we are attempting to overcome an unnecessary obstacle. So, to look back at my analogy of when I spoke to my dad, I was voluntarily going back there to speak to my dad and tell him my latest idea, and he was putting an obstacle in my way, uh, probably intentionally to motivate me. But that obstacle was there. I didn't have to face that obstacle. I didn't have to go there and tell him. I could have simply decided to not speak to my father about things and just to get on with life. But I would argue that that wouldn't necessarily make me where I am today. So when we're playing a game, we're taking a voluntary action and we're going to attempt to overcome something that's unnecessary. Looking at a video game, a classic like Space Invaders, we are spending time shooting aliens. Okay, we do that voluntarily. We don't need to do that. We can simply just turn the computer off. And surely somebody could program something these days which would allow AI to just do it for us, and we could say, "Yep, I've killed all the aliens." Okay, so the key to games is that they are voluntary. And one of the words that's going to get popped up in a few minutes is illusory. So for Suits, the whole idea of game was that it was a illusory action. And this is a word that Suits invented, so I thought I'd better cover it a little bit. Illusory is just of the game. So it's a part of something that it defines or is an action within a game. And so we all have this illusory attitude. A illusory attitude is our willingness to play a game, our willingness to partake, because without that willingness, we're just bystanders. We are not actively in the game. Okay. And therefore, if we were to say we don't have a willingness to play the game, then perhaps that would underline that our life or our existence is not so important. We're not taking part in what's happening in the world. We don't have the illusory desire to take aim. And if we see life as a game, then the illusory attitude becomes extremely vital. So I don't usually read off slides, but I'm going to read this particular slide because it's a really important statement that Suits made. So, to play a game is to attempt to achieve a specific state of affairs, a prelusory goal, using only the means permitted by rules, the illusory means, where the rules prohibit use of more efficient in favor of less effective means. So, those are constitutive rules, and whose rules are accepted just because they make possible such an activity. That's the illusory attitude. So we're taking part in games, not because we have to. We could choose through our illusory attitude to not take part in games. But the pre-illusory goal of life, call that what you will, call that fame, call it riches, call it success, is only possible through the means of applying the rules of society, the society we live in. And sociologists have been working on these rules for many years, and perhaps they haven't realised, and perhaps we haven't realised they've been working on it. But there definitely have been, and there's definitely been ground made in this field. So I'm going to break this down into a few different areas. So the prelusory goal is about the goals that we aim for, and the constitutive rules are about the rules that we apply, and the illusory attitude is about our existence on Earth in general. It's about the meaning of life. Okay, and there's no real way to get around that. So Emil Durkheim said that to pursue a goal which is by a definition unattainable is looking at my notes, is by definition unattainable, is to be in a state of perpetual unhappiness. So Durkheim's work focused mainly upon the field of symbolic interactionism. Okay, so Durkheim focused extensively on the idea that society is exhibiting a collective consciousness and a shared system of beliefs, morals, and values. And these systems of belief unite people, and we cooperate in a social system. It's the goal of life in order to be part of society itself. And this is what Durkheim's research actually told us. It actually explained to us why this is so and why it was important to society. Of course, we can carry on with that Talcott Parsons cannot go without being mentioned when you think about Durkheim. And Talcott Parsons kind of carried on uh, uh, Durkheim's work by talking about the focus of extensively our hierarchical nature structures emphasize that societies and systems, imperatives, are prerequisite functions that must be met. So there are prerequisite functions in the world, Talcott Parsons tells us, that must be met. There are rules, and there is a goal that in order for us to achieve success within society, we must meet those functions and be part of that society. So so sociologists, since the beginning of sociology, have laid out for us what the rules are and why those rules are important. And so the rules become just an enabler for what we actually do in our day-to-day life. And what we do in our day-to-day life is to play the game. So how do the constitutive rules work? So let's talk about constitutive rules. We have to apply certain things that are within our power to apply in order to achieve our ultimate goal, which is to be recognized and successful within society. How can we do that? Well, Thorstein Veblen was one of the first people to think of this, other than perhaps Karl Marx. And Veblen came up with what he called the theory of the leisure class. And that theory of the leisure class tells us that if we are rich, if we are aiming in society to be important and recognized as an important part of society, one of the ways we do that is through conspicuous consumption, through showing people that we can afford to buy things that other people can't. One of the really prime examples of conspicuous consumption that I always try to refer to in my lectures is that let's take the habit of women having long nails, decorative long nails. This is a way for traditionally, perhaps not today, but traditionally, this is a way for women to show that they are, in fact, do not need to work for a living. Because with long nails, you can't do manual tasks. Therefore, if I have long nails, I can show that I don't need to work for a living. There's somebody out there to look after me. And this starts to make some sort of repercussions in the gaming world. If we think about esports, particularly, if we think about competitive gaming, we can start to see that the influence of Veblen's ideas and the influence of a leisure class within esports. So, in this paper, one of the factors of purchasing is to display wealth and social status. So we think about skins in CS:GO and the value that they can have, and the fact that owning those skins can give us some sort of status within that gaming world. That status is currency for us to prove that we are important within that world. It's our success within the gaming world and simulates the kind of success that we try to gain within the real world by buying fast cars or expensive clothes. This is one of the things that kind of points towards the possibility that the games that we make are actually simulations of the lives that we live, and that they're as important to us as the actual meaning of life itself. And more than that, they probably start to show us that the meaning of life is evolved around games. Another great sociologist who I kind of feel as if I'm directly connected to is Norbert Elias. Norbert Elias was one of the greatest sociologists of our time. I was lucky enough to be supervised by someone who was a student of a student of a student of his. And so I kind of feel a kind of a relationship to Norbert Elias that I suppose a lot of people don't. And Norbert Elias thought about things like the civilizing process. The civilizing process tells us that as life goes on, we try to civilize ourselves, to try and become better and try and become less effective, less offensive to the world. So one of the really famous things that Elias found, and Elias did his research by looking at past etiquette books from history, and Elias found that in one of those past etiquette books from the 16th century, that it was seen as being bad manners to defecate under the stairs if there was a lady present, by implication suggesting that it was okay to defecate under the stairs if you was on your own. This kind of shows us that today we've come a long way since the 16th century, and it's because we are embarrassed. It's not because we are particularly more cultured, but because shame has forced us to progress along a line of increased civilization. And the reason this is important is because we can see this happening in games. Hunting is a sport that I've never actually taken part in, and it's quite an offensive sport. I'd like to point out, quite importantly, that this picture is AI generated and censored. So at least no animal has been harmed in the actual making of this particular picture. But we all know that there's pictures out there of hunting trophies which involve animals being killed. So what does this tell us about computer games? Well, computer games take away the need to kill. They civilize us. We can now hunt in virtual reality. We can track down animals in virtual reality, shoot and kill virtual reality animals. Okay. So, what we're actually doing is civilizing ourselves through the game itself. And this tells us that games themselves and the constituent rules within those games are influencing us as people. They influence us as society, but they're also modeling what we desire. They're modeling what we want from that society. And for that society is to be more civilized. And it makes sense. We don't want to kill things. Uh, and we see this in lots of types of games. Fishing games, which is my past hobby, and fishing games becoming more and more popular because there's no longer any need to cast a line and pull a fish out of its natural environment. Games take away the need for us to kill and give us a civilized alternative to that. Again, modeling exactly what is happening in our day to day lives. So, see, I will take a little break here and explain that there are lots of different um, sociological theories that explain the illusory attitude. But perhaps the best way to explain the illusory attitude is to take you on a little mind experiment. And the mind experiment is something that Bernard Suits first came up with. And it's a way to prove that games are, in fact, central to our existence as human beings. So imagine utopia, if you will, a world where you don't need to work, where you don't need to feed yourself. Everything is done telepathically. The second you want a new house, it appears for you. You want a new car, it appears for you. You want food, you just think about it and the food appears for you. You don't even need to eat it because the food appears in your stomach. Everything about life becomes something that you don't need to do. Under those circumstances, human beings, everything we do becomes a game. Everything we do would become a game. So even if we was to go to the shops to buy something, that would be a game. We would have a prelusory goal of buying something. We'd have rules. You have to walk to the shops, and we'd have constituent rules. Sorry, we'd have workshops, and we'd have the illusory attitude in that we'd actually want to do it. This demonstrates then that games are really important to existence of human beings. And so this should really be my mic drop moment. This should be where I've actually said, yep, so there you go. That's the proof of it all. Games are the meaning to life. You can go away. You can tell that to your children. You can tell that to your next generation. There's no doubt about it. But perhaps we're wrong. And perhaps games are just part of life. And I've kind of coined a term for this that I use quite often in my own research, which is socioludology. Perhaps the idea of games and the way that we live is just an aspect of social existence. Perhaps it's what we are as humans. Games do seem important, but what if it's a bit much for me to claim that games are the meaning of life? Okay, so perhaps I should start doubting myself straight away. There's another way to look at things, and that is that games provide purpose. They give us something to do. They make it a challenge, and they stop us from being bored. That's the game's main goal. If we take the modern idea of esports and competitive gaming out of it, the only reason to play a game is to occupy us. So they provide us purpose. They give us something to do. They give us a level of enjoyment. And through shared passions, they connect people. So they also develop another social goal. They give us connections, they give us relationships with other human beings. That's a really important social goal that we always seem to find useful in games. From the early days of games, which were just ditches in the hole, in the ground, in games like Wari, the idea of a game was to bring two people at least together to play something and enjoy themselves and to connect as human beings. And games allow us to level up. So that's another really important social goal. So they allow us to learn and to develop ideas. Within that world of online fishing, perhaps, we could learn new ways to catch fish, in theory. We could learn new ways to interact with people, in theory. And these things are a part of the main mechanics of games and part of their main cause. So looking at that, let's say that maybe games give meaning to life rather than they are the meaning of life. That seems to work for me. That is probably my mic drop moment. But I have to say probably, because what happens if games don't give meaning to life? What happens if that's not what they're for? That's a worrying thought. So I have to go and have a few more sleepless nights and think about things in perhaps a different way. And one of the ways to look at this is through simulation theory. And for fear of sounding like a conspiracy theorist and a kook, we have to start thinking, I think, at this point in our existence, about the possibility of simulation theory being a thing. Nick Bostrom, a professor at Oxford University, has asked us to think, are we living in a computer simulation? So perhaps games aren't the meaning of life. Perhaps games literally are life. Perhaps they're literally what we're living. And this brings up some really worrying questions. So what would happen if everything we see around us, everybody we see around us, everything you see in front of you, if I am just a simulation to you, if I don't exist? What would happen if that was the case? Or even if I do exist, what would happen if I was just another mindless part of this game, playing the game from a different perspective as well? It's a really interesting possibility, and it's a possibility that becomes more and more realistic as we go down the line. So let's think for a moment about gaming only 40 years ago. Okay, so I have just recently bought an Atari 2600 Plus so I can enjoy 8-bit gaming. Okay, and in my day, when I was little, when I was that little guy at the beginning, Atari 2600 Plus was the cutting edge of gaming. Today, some graphics are very difficult to tell from reality. Are we being selfish to think that we're the first people that have walked this way? Are we being selfish to think that just because we can create great graphics, that another civilization hasn't existed in the universe that could also create great graphics? And then if we think about that, that's only maybe a 50-year gap since we worked on 8-bit computing. And today, we find ourselves with graphics that are very close to reality. What's going to happen in another 50 years? What's going to happen in another 100 years? What's going to happen in another 500 years? Is it possible that by that time we'll have all slipped into that gaming utopia where we don't need to do anything for ourselves and be so desperate to enjoy the game again that we'll actually willingly put our minds into a game in order to take part in life and enjoy its challenges? And is it possible then that we're not the first people to get into that situation, but other civilizations exist out there that have done the same? And that in fact, we are part of that civilization, unable to remember that part of our lives, but enjoying this game probably over and over again for the rest of eternity. It's actually quite a scary thought, but on the other hand, it's quite a nice and reassuring thought. It's that idea that Nick Bostrom brings up, that at the end of our lives, it might just be game over, start again. And there's many religions we know that have similar thoughts. We can't prove that. We can't know that for real. We can't be 100% sure that that's a thing. But what we can do is use that idea to teach ourselves about the world. So part of my current research revolves around what I call conflict ludology. You've probably noticed I like to come up with fancy names for things. And I'm currently awaiting bid, AHRC bid about a funding for a project that proposes that we could use games to understand more about our archaeological past, specifically about the archaeological past of conflict and warfare. So we can use the fact that we know that life and existence bears huge resemblances to gameplay in order to then build our own simulations to understand the past through gameplay. This gives us the possibility to use games in ways that we've never really thought possible before, to actually predict the past, to actually analyze the past and understand the past, and then in a few years' time, perhaps predict the future and see where we are actually going. Through applying the ideas that the life is a game and that life is a rules, and that those rules are innate and that we have to apply by them, we can actually make steps into understanding the world in a much deeper way. So perhaps schools are just a tool to help us understand life. Perhaps games have just developed over thousands of years to help us understand where we are and what life means to us. And this is kind of where I am at the moment. But of course, there's always that word. There's probably. And I suppose that that's to be continued because I really have not got past that point yet. This is where I am in my current career and where I see myself developing from. So how am I going to continue? So there's an idea that I have, which is a network of other sociologists that are going to be interested in talking about socioludology, about understanding how gamified sociology can tell us about the world. So that's a project for the future. I'm hoping that people become interested in that because currently that's a research network of one, me. And so that's not very useful. So if anyone's listening and you're interested in that, please do get in touch. And the way you can get in touch is through my website, which is drwedge.uk. And I'm hoping to do a lot more blogging on there. And hopefully that will enable you to understand exactly where I'm coming from and where the idea of the meaning of life and games really resides. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very deep. That took a turn I wasn't expecting you to go down. So it's made me made me think a lot and made me like consider a lot of our life outlooks, which is very interesting. I think it's fascinating that like as humans, like we just make play. I think that's quite. That's quite cool, and like how animals do it as well, like the distinction between dogs and cats, and how our relationship with dogs is a working relationship, but cats they just essentially own us and we feed them,
Yeah.
which is it's interesting to see how play is observed, um, not just for humans but through animals as well, and how we exemplify that with video games. So that's interesting. What's your? I'm gonna guess it's fishing. But what's your favorite method of making play? And if it is fishing, what's the
Well,
next thing?
well, yeah, I mean, my research and most of my life has been spent fishing, and that's what I kind of studied. But prior to that, I was hugely into Dungeons and Dragons
Hmm.
and hugely into video games, and I'm interested in video game design and how the ideas of sociologists can help influence that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think really my general kind of approach to play is to just literally engage with the world, and I
Hmm.
think role playing allows us to do that really on a very special level. I think wargaming allows us to do that on a really interesting level, and video games allow us to do it on an increasingly deep level. Surprisingly, I don't think they're quite as deep as some methods of play yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's we are slowly pushing the envelope out, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, Awesome, cool. So that was Dr. Andrew Wedgbury talking about how games can, in fact, be the meaning of life. So if you have any questions for us, feel free to throw them into chat. And if you want to offer us any feedback, you can do so at the following link below. So I'll give that a few minutes. For people to get that processed. We do have coming up next. We have Dr. David White talking about simulating marine ecologies. So if you're interested in some physical applications of games technologies, that's the talk for you, and that's going to be in approximately 18 minutes. Awesome. So, Andrew, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come talk to us today. Thank you for everyone that's participated and has watched today. And we'll see you all at the next talk at 2 p.m.
Thank you.